the truth men don't want to hear. What if I told you that women don't love you for who you are, but only for what you can offer them? Not your soul, not your poetry, but your resources, your status, your usefulness. That statement alone might offend you, or maybe it stings because somewhere deep down, it feels uncomfortably true. This isn't just a passing opinion from a bitter man. This was the cold conclusion of one of the most controversial minds in Western philosophy, Arthur Schopenhauer. A man whose thoughts were so raw, so unfiltered, that even today, over 160 years after his death, people still refuse to quote him in public. But in private, they wonder if he might have been right all along. Schopenhauer wasn't a man of illusions. He didn't care about social approval. He looked into the nature of reality and stripped away the layers. When it came to love, especially the love of women, he saw something that most men spend their entire lives refusing to admit. And when he wrote it down, it wasn't to please anyone. It was to wake men up. Imagine for a moment that everything you've been taught about romance, soulmates, and unconditional love was a carefully woven illusion. Imagine that your heartbreaks weren't just bad luck, but consequences of a truth you've been trained to ignore. Schopenhauer lived like a man out of time, a philosopher who observed human behavior the way a scientist observes animals. Cold, clinical, detached. And what he saw in women, what he saw in how they love, left him disillusioned for life. He wrote things about women that, if spoken aloud today, would get you canceled. But here's the twist. That doesn't make him wrong. It only makes him dangerous. So the question is not whether Schopenhauer was cruel. The real question is, was he accurate? Let's find out. Schopenhauer, the philosopher who lost faith in women. Arthur Schopenhauer was not born to be loved, not by the world, not by women, and certainly not by the people closest to him. He was a genius in exile, not from a country, but from human warmth. His father, a wealthy merchant, was distant and often cold. His mother, Johanna Schopenhauer, was a celebrated writer and socialite in German high society. She adored the stage, attention, and the company of intellectuals, but had no patience for her son's brooding nature. Their relationship was not just strained, it was broken. From a young age, Schopenhauer was surrounded by emotional winters. Conversations with his mother often ended in contempt. She once told him that he was incapable of making anyone happy, and he believed her. Not because she was right, but because life kept proving her point. He turned to books for companionship and found solace in solitude. But as he read deeper into Eastern and Western thought, his worldview began to take a darker shape. He concluded that life itself was suffering, driven by an irrational force he called the will, a blind, endless desire that manipulates everything from nature to love, especially love. For Schopenhauer, romantic love wasn't noble or pure. It wasn't destiny or the meeting of soul. It was biology wearing a mask. He saw men as tragic characters, duped into sacrifice by instincts they don't understand, and women as evolutionary agents, hardwired to manipulate that ignorance for survival. He once wrote, "Women are by nature designed for deception, not as a moral failure, but as a biological imperative." In his eyes, the beauty of a woman was not a gift. It was a tool, a weapon, a mechanism to attract the strongest mate and secure the best chance of reproduction. Her flirtation wasn't affection. It was strategy. While society praised romantic love as divine, Schopenhauer tore the curtain down. To him, love was nature's trap, a trick to bind a man to a woman long enough to create a child, and then discard him. What men mistake for emotional depth, he argued, is merely instinctual behavior dressed in poetic illusion. Schopenhauer didn't hate women. He simply believed that men had been lied to, not by women themselves, but by culture, by religion, by literature, all of which had wrapped female nature in fantasy and denied its raw purpose. That denial, he claimed, was the root of male suffering in love. He saw women as children of the present, focused on what is, not what could be. They weren't interested in a man's potential. They were drawn to what he could provide now: security, resources, reputation. He believed that the female brain was evolutionarily tuned to this calculation, and that emotional attachment was often a byproduct of necessity, not passion. In a world obsessed with fairy tales, Schopenhauer offered a horror story, but to him, it wasn't horror. It was truth. The reason his words sting is not because they're filled with hatred, but because they strike a nerve. A part of us recognizes that we've felt this truth before, maybe after a breakup, maybe after betrayal, maybe in the silence of unreturned love. And yet, instead of confronting it, most men choose to believe again, hope again, fall again. Schopenhauer never did. The more he observed, the colder his conclusions became. He once said that if you want to test a woman's character, don't watch how she treats her friends. Watch how she treats a man who no longer benefits her. It wasn't bitterness that shaped his views. It was observation. And what he observed was a pattern. But is that pattern universal? Are all women wired this way, or was Schopenhauer simply projecting his pain onto half the human race? That's what we'll explore next. Because sometimes the illusion isn't in the woman, it's in the man who refuses to see her clearly. Why men always idealize women. There's something poetic about the way a man falls in love. It's rarely casual, it's rarely shallow. For many men, love feels like a calling, a sacred moment, a turning point. He doesn't just want her attention, he wants her soul. He wants to save her, protect her, worship her, and be her only one. This romantic instinct is powerful, but it's also dangerous, because more often than not, he isn't falling for the woman herself. He's falling for the version of her he built in his mind. Psychologists call it idealization. Schopenhauer simply called it illusion, and no one is more susceptible to it than a man who hasn't yet been broken. From a young age, boys are fed a steady diet of female fantasy. In Western culture, the image of the pure, kind-hearted woman is everywhere. She's the princess locked in a tower waiting for a brave man to save her. She's the muse who inspires the artist, the goddess who redeems the lost soul. Every movie, every song, every poem turns her into something more than human. She becomes a symbol, a cure, a reward. But what happens when that symbol turns back into a person? Real life is messier. Women are not waiting in towers. They are navigating the same brutal realities men face, using strategies that have been shaped by millions of years of survival instincts. While men fall for beauty and mystery, women are scanning for value. And not the kind you can fake with a nice smile or a clever joke. They look for security, power, status, and confidence, not because they're superficial, but because evolution wired them to detect strength. The stakes were always higher for them. One wrong choice could mean vulnerability, pregnancy, abandonment. Schopenhauer called this the unconscious will of the species. He argued that what we call love is simply nature's way of making sure the strongest traits get passed on. In other words, you think you're in love because you're swept up in emotion, but she's choosing based on something far more ancient and calculated. That doesn't mean women are evil. It means they're playing a different game. And the problem is, men keep thinking they're playing the same one. Imagine a battlefield. On one side stands the man, heart open, flowers in hand, speaking in poetry. On the other side is nature's strategy, wearing a beautiful face, executing a silent mission. He fights with emotion, she fights with instinct, and yet, the man still believes he's entering a fairy tale, that if he's kind enough, patient enough, loyal enough, she will love him forever. But evolution doesn't reward kindness. It rewards strength, confidence, and sometimes detachment. This is why men so often get blindsided, why they feel betrayed when she suddenly grows cold, changes direction, or chooses someone else. It's not because she was pretending. It's because she was adapting to her needs, to her options, to her environment. A man who offers everything but doesn't fit her survival blueprint becomes invisible over time. Schopenhauer's insight was brutal but clear. Love, as we romanticize it, is a trick of biology. The man sees the woman as salvation, the woman sees the man as opportunity. And when that opportunity fades, so does the connection. This is the tragic mismatch. Men want transcendence, women want alignment, and when the two don't match, the pain feels personal, even if it never was. Now, some might argue this view is too cynical, that it denies real connection, that it turns love into a transaction. But Schopenhauer would argue that denial is the very reason men suffer, because they keep loving with blindfolds on. He once wrote that men are the fools of nature, seduced into sacrifice without ever knowing the rules. Women, on the other hand, instinctively know how to move within the system. They don't need to be taught. They just act. This doesn't mean men shouldn't love, but it does mean they should understand what they're loving, not a dream. Not a myth, but a person with their own hidden logic. So what happens when a man's dream of eternal love crashes into the cold mechanics of evolutionary strategy? Who gets hurt first? Who wakes up bleeding and who refuses to wake up at all? When a man gives too much, a woman pulls away. He was the kind of man most women say they want: generous, loyal, devoted. He fell hard, gave everything, and never made her question his love. He paid her bills, fixed her car, remembered her birthday, and stayed up late just to talk about her dreams. To him, that was love, commitment, proof that he was the one. But to her, something began to shift. What started as affection slowly turned into boredom. Gratitude faded into irritation. And one day, without warning, she pulled away. No drama, no final fight, just silence, the kind that doesn't explain itself. He was left confused, heartbroken, asking the question every good man has asked at least once in his life. What did I do wrong? The answer, according to modern evolutionary psychology, is nothing. And yet, everything. There's a concept called mate switching. It suggests that women, especially when they feel their current partner is no longer the best available option, begin to emotionally detach. Not out of cruelty, but instinct. The process is gradual, subtle. She compares, she distances, she rationalizes, and eventually she replaces. What's haunting about this theory is how closely it mirrors what Schopenhauer described almost 2 centuries ago. He believed that female love is not rooted in moral judgment, but biological necessity. A woman doesn't choose the man who tries the hardest. She chooses the man who feels most valuable. In that moment, you can be kind, honest, and loving. But if your perceived utility decreases if she feels she can do better, if your ambition weakens, if your dominance fades, her instincts begin to look elsewhere. Schopenhauer argued that this wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. A survival mechanism passed down through evolution. And here's the twist. It's not despite your love that you were replaced. It's because of it. When you give too much, when you sacrifice yourself without boundaries, when you become entirely available and you remove the mystery, you eliminate the chase, you present yourself as conquered. And what is conquered is rarely valued. She didn't leave because you weren't enough. She left because, in her eyes, you gave away too much of yourself for free. This is where many men suffer. They confuse overgiving with love, submission with romance, and total devotion with security. But women don't fall in love with comfort. They fall in love with conviction, with energy, with strength that doesn't beg to be seen. Schopenhauer warned against this illusion. He said that men offer their hearts like open books, hoping to be read and cherished. But women aren't reading. They're scanning, looking for alignment, advantage that can disappear the moment you stop being a challenge. This isn't about playing games, then it's about understanding dynamics. When a man overinvests before value is earned, he disturbs the balance. He tries to buy love with sacrifice. But love, at its core, can't be bought. It must be evoked. So what can a man do? How do you love without becoming a doormat? How do you give without being discarded? The answer starts with awareness. You must stop romanticizing your own pain. Stop thinking that suffering proves your love. Stop assuming that your loyalty guarantees hers. It doesn't. You need to understand that attraction has rules. Emotional dynamics have patterns. And if you ignore them, you'll repeat the same heartbreak in a different body. Women don't replace men because they're cruel. They do it because they feel entitled to seek the best option available. It's not about betrayal. It's about selection. And the moment she senses you no longer challenge her, no longer inspire her, no longer lead, she starts drifting, and not out of hate, out of instinct, out. Men who survive this realization don't become bitter. They become wise, because now they see what Schopenhauer saw. That love is not something you win by giving more. It's something you maintain by knowing when to stop giving. So ask yourself, if you were replaced after giving your all, maybe the problem wasn't what you gave. Maybe it was how little you left for yourself. How to love without getting hurt. After all the heartbreak, after the disappointments and betrayals, Schopenhauer didn't become numb. He became disciplined. He didn't shut down emotionally. He simply stopped offering his heart like a sacrifice. He learned to love without losing himself. And that, for a man, is the rarest kind of strength. Schopenhauer lived the rest of his life mostly alone, but not bitter. He wasn't chasing. He wasn't pleading. He chose peace over passion. Not because he hated love, but because he understood what it really was, a force that demands clarity, not blind surrender. His life became a quiet rebellion against emotional slavery. He wrote, he walked. He studied the world without needing it to love him back. That is emotional freedom. And today, that freedom is more essential than ever. So how does a man love without being destroyed? It begins with principle, not fantasy. First, never mistake attention for affection. A woman giving you time doesn't always mean she feels something deep. Sometimes she's curious. Sometimes she's bored. Sometimes she's testing. Men often misread interest as intimacy. But affection is not measured by moments, it's measured by consistency. If she's only warm when it's convenient, it's not love, it's leverage. Second, don't listen to what she says, watch what she does. When words are soft, actions are loud. If her behavior contradicts her promises, believe the behavior. A woman who respects you will not confuse you. She won't disappear when you need her most. She won't say one thing and live another. Pay attention not to the poetry, but the patterns. Third, set emotional boundaries. Always keep a part of yourself that belongs to you. Do not drown in the relationship. Do not make her your purpose. Keep your passions. Keep your mission. Love her. But do not orbit around her, because the moment you give away your center, you lose gravity, and when you lose gravity, people drift. These three principles aren't tactics. They're anchors. They protect your self-respect. They guard your time, your energy, your peace. And most importantly, they allow you to walk away not out of bitterness, but because you know your worth. And the truth is, men who live this way don't suffer less because they're colder. They suffer less because they're wiser. They've seen the patterns. They've stopped chasing illusions. And ironically, these are the men women respect most, because women sense when a man is not desperate. They sense when he is full without needing to be filled. That energy changes everything. You've probably seen him, the man who listens more than he speaks, who doesn't chase, but also doesn't ignore, who is calm in chaos, who can be deeply in love, yet walk away when disrespected. That man is not lucky. He is trained. Maybe you won't become Schopenhauer. Maybe you still believe in connection, in romance, in deep love. That's fine. You don't have to reject love to protect yourself. But you do have to stop being naive, because love without wisdom becomes self-harm, and the world has enough broken men already. So if you've ever felt like you gave too much, fell too fast, trusted too easily, good, that means your heart still works. But now it's time to sharpen your mind, because the man who sees clearly is never a victim again. Living awake in a world of illusions. Schopenhauer was never trying to start a war between men and women. He wasn't calling for resentment or revenge. He wasn't promoting bitterness. What he offered was a lens, a way of seeing the world not through the fog of fairy tales, but through the sharpness of reality. He understood that most suffering begins not in what happens to us, but in what we expect from others, especially in love. And when a man expects purity from strategy or eternity from biology, he's not loving, he's hallucinating. Schopenhauer's message wasn't to hate women. It was to stop worshiping illusions, to stop expecting angels in a world built on evolution. He believed that freedom begins the moment a man sees clearly, not cynically, but soberly. And when you see clearly, you love differently. You stop chasing promises. You start reading patterns. You stop bleeding for people who only ever wanted to borrow your strength. Modern men are trapped in a silent war between what they feel and what they've been told to believe. They're told to open up, give all, fall deeply, love unconditionally. But then they are punished for being predictable, replaced for being too available, broken for being too honest. Schopenhauer invites you to step out of that cycle, not to stop loving, but to start loving wisely. To understand that the world doesn't owe you a love that lasts forever. It only offers moments. Moments that must be navigated with both heart and spine. Because love is a beautiful fire. It can warm you, illuminate you, even transform you. But if you get too close without awareness, it will burn away everything you are. So the question is no longer just how much love you can give. The real question is how much truth can you handle? Because in the end, you only have two options. You can keep dreaming in pink, hoping the illusion saves you, or you can wake up, and finally save yourself.